Hello, welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I am Bigidly42. He is Scott Mailwick at Sports 25 to Life, and we're talking about tonight's action. Unfortunately, it's no longer Clayton Kershaw Day. In the past couple minutes, we saw he has been scratched, and now Mike Bolsinger going to take his place. So, if you wanted to play any A's bats that were cheap, now you can against Mike Bolsinger. Not a terrible pitcher necessarily, but definitely a guy you can target with some really cheap A's bats now. So, that's going to be interesting to see tonight. So starting things off at pitcher then. Obviously we're not starting with Kershaw anymore, but we'll start with some other options because after him there aren't a lot of guys you feel great about. You like Tyson Ross against the Mets at 10-8, but he's kind of expensive. His really only weakness is walks. He's got a great strikeout rate. Best in the league at giving up the least amount of home runs. Elite ground ball rate. So I like him quite a bit, but then again, this is a San Diego team that just can't provide run support for anyone. We saw Syndergaard mow him down last night. Obviously, Syndergaard much better than Cologne that they're going to see on the other side tonight. But I think he, and then Lance McCullers, if we don't see Mike Trout in lineup tonight, it's possible that he sits out once again. McCullers has had a couple weak starts recently, but I think he's an interesting play as well at 8,800.
Yeah, I like the guy on the other side of that game too now. Garrett Richards against Houston. Houston strikes out a lot. Richards has been really, really good lately. I think he's gone 7+ innings in 6 of his last 8 starts. Had a couple really nice games in there. Threw a complete game, I believe, shutout against Boston 2 starts ago. I don't love him, but at 9,300, he feels a little bit underpriced to me against a team that strikes out quite a bit. He has really good command, so that's a plus for him. That's probably my top end cash game play. I think that I'm going to roll with. I like Ross a decent amount, but I don't love the line there. The Mets offense has been quite a bit better over the last 2 weeks also, which is a little worrisome there. Outside of that, as far as cash games go at least, I think the other 2 guys I'm going with are going to be relatively cheap guys. Rick Porcello is a guy I like quite a bit against the White Sox. I know the White Sox have been hitting better lately, and they had a really nice game last night. Only 6,100 though. Small favorite at -115. Not a play that I love, but at 6,100, I feel pretty good about it. The other one that I'm probably going to run out there a ton, I'm a guy that plays R.A. Dickey probably way too much, but he's been pretty good over the last 3 games. He's gone 7, 6, and 8 1/3 innings over the last 3. 5 total earned runs over that span also. We know the Blue Jays offense can put up some runs, so I think there's a huge chance at a win here. Obviously, Vegas agrees with me. I want to say that line is what, -270 was the last I saw.
It's right around there, between 250 280, I think, depending on where you look.
Yeah, so I mean that's probably my favorite play on DraftKings today at 6,500. At the very least, he should get you deep into the game and give you a really good chance at a win, and that's what I'm looking for in cash games, especially when there's no one that really jumps out at you. For 6,500, that's really hard for me to argue with. I'm going to have a lot of him today.
Yeah, I like that. Another guy I like, obviously more as a GPP play, but Jose Quintana, $8,300. It's at Boston, so you don't like the ballpark factors, and Boston doesn't strike out a lot, but they're also not very good against left-handed pitchers. And outside of a game against KC, Quintana has been very good over his last 5 starts. At Cleveland, at Chicago, against Toronto, at St. Louis, so some tough matchups as well. He's a guy that's really locked in right now. I'll be playing him quite a bit in some tournaments at 8,300.
Yeah, that's a pretty good price there. Another cheaper pitcher that I like is Doug Fister today against Miami. Miami's offense still kind of sluggish. D. Gordon's back now, which adds a nice element for them, but I still don't mind Fister at 5,500. Really small favorite. It's basically a pick him. He's -109. Fister hasn't been very good, but I think as a GPP play, he's pretty interesting at his price. There's one other guy at the top that I liked a decent amount. I think Tanaka is an interesting GPP play too at 10-2. I don't think anyone's going to own him. Texas is a pretty good offense at this point, but they also can go cold at any time. Tanaka's pitched pretty well lately. He's one of the bigger favorites on the day now that Kershaw's out of the picture, and like I said, I think his ownership is probably less than 5% at that price, and that just makes him a pretty solid GPP play for me with quite a bit of upside. He has a Texas team that strikes out a decent amount, and Tanaka is a decent strikeout pitcher himself.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Like you said, going to be very low owned tonight. Maybe it's a little bit more of a bump with Kershaw out, but I don't see very, very much at all. Maybe marginal. Chris Tillman at $6,000 is a guy who was horrible beginning of the season. He was a good pitcher last year for the most part, but over his last 3 starts, he's gone 21 innings, allowed just 3 earned runs, and he has 18 strikeouts. So $6,000 against Atlanta. I know Freddie Freeman's back, but it's still not a great offense. They're slightly above average with Freeman in there, but at $6K, I think he's got some potential as well.
Yeah, I'll throw in the last guy in that range. That range has a lot of good options today. I would definitely recommend selecting one of your pitchers out of that range, if not both, if you're trying to load up an offensive lineup. But Bolsinger, who we haven't talked about yet, is still minus 200 against Oakland. Only a 7 over-under. I think that probably rises a little bit as the day goes on now with Kershaw out. But minus 200 is pretty hard to argue with at 6,100. With between him, Dickey, you mentioned Tillman already. I mentioned Fister. There's a lot of good options on there. Porcello, I also mentioned earlier. That's a lot of options in the 6,000 range. The only other guy I really have that I would consider today is probably John Lackey, but I don't love him against Cincinnati. He's a decent favorite, decent over-under at 7.5, 8,600. I think I prefer Quintana, like you mentioned, in that price range, but Lackey's a decent GPP option too, I think.
Yeah, I could see that definitely. And then as we move to catcher, Russell Martin's my favorite play. The Toronto had the highest team total last night against the lefty. They have the highest team total again tonight against a righty because it's a terrible righty. They have a 5-run team total. Martin at $4,500. He's been a hot hitter over the past week or so. I expect big things out of these guys. I think you already kind of mentioned it for a second as well. So these are the guy. This is a team that I'm targeting as much as I can. Gotta love Brian McCann as a lefty against Colby Lewis as well. Yeah. I think those 2 guys are the top options, and I think there's a pretty big drop-off to the next guys. I mean, you like Yasmani Grandal as a lefty against a righty, but face time against Jesse Chavez, he's a pretty solid pitcher, so I'm not going out of my way to pick on him.
Yeah, but, I mean, I don't mind him at $3,400. That's a pretty good price. Vote at $3,000 is probably a better price, honestly, for a guy hitting 3 or 4 spots higher in the lineup in most cases.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, I like McCann. I have no problem with him at $3,900. Russell Martin is a guy that I'm not super excited to pay $4,500 for, but if you're using 2 of those 6,000 pitchers, it's pretty easy to get a Toronto stack today, and he's going to be a big part of that. I love stacking Toronto today, assuming their lineup looks halfway decent. I feel like people are going to be down on him after last night. I know I played him a ton last night, and they did not help me very much at all. Yeah. Martin was probably one of the better picks out of that lineup, but I think he's a pretty nice play. Outside of that, I mean, everyone else is around the same prices as guys we've mentioned and not nearly as good a plays. So I think I'm sticking to those top guys for the most part at catcher. If I'm going cheap, it's going to be Vogt or maybe Wieters, depending on if Wieters is in the lineup. Again, he's been in and out lately, so you never really know with him. I'd prefer to go Vogt just for the health aspect.
Yeah, and definitely his price is there, assuming that Kershaw is pitching, right. He's not, so definitely a nice cheap tag for him. First base, Mark Teixeira left last night's game after getting hit by a pitch on the foot. If he plays, you got to love him in that ballpark. I mean, we saw 21 runs last night from them. You're obviously not going to see that again, but that's still really hot, thin air. Should be a lot of run scoring, especially against Lewis, so like him. If he doesn't play, you want a cheap play, you can play him first base or outfield. Garrett Jones, he might be in the lineup anyway, even if Teixeira is. So
yeah, he probably will, but he'll be getting probably cleanup or fifth if Teixeira's out, which is going to make him probably the best value play of the day, especially in the outfield.
Yeah, and he's really, really cheap, so you got to like him. Joey Votto's been on another planet since the All-Star break. I believe I saw he's batting .561 since then. I mean, he's just absolutely locked in. Got to like him. I feel like he won't be very highly owned at $4,600 against Lackey. Lackey is a solid pitcher. But then once again, Edwin Encarnacion, $4,400. Gets Jerome Williams. Another one of those guys you mentioned was a letdown last night, but, I mean, you can only have so many times of this good of an offense struggling, and Jerome Williams is an awful, awful pitcher.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the main reason to go back to the Toronto well tonight more than anything. It's not the prices or over-under. It's Jerome Williams. I think he's 4th in the major leagues in home runs allowed this year. I mean, there's just a lot to like there in that whole Toronto lineup. Outside of that, I'm spending up at first base like usual. Garrett Jones is probably the only guy I would consider outside of this top tier. I think Freddie Freeman's another nice play today at Baltimore. Great home run park factor for lefties. We saw him hit one out to right field last night. Outside of that, nothing else I love too much. I mean, Adrian Gonzalez at $4,100 is probably a decent cash game play against a righty, but I mean, to save a couple $100 from like Encarnacion or someone that looks like they have massive upside tonight, I don't think I'm doing that.
No, I don't blame you. It seemed like Encarnacion was just the guy you kind of slot in your lineup now last night because he was too cheap in cash games. Not much more expensive and maybe even a better matchup for him tonight. So he'll probably be the guy I'll be playing for the most part as well. All right, moving over to second base. We've got not a lot of options at second base that I really love. I mean, you got Rougned Odor, who you usually like, but he's got Tanaka today. Tough matchup, so he's kind of pricey there. You like Colton Wong at 4,100 if you're going to pay up. But for me, I'll probably try to save some money. You got guys like Jimmy Paredes against Mike Foltynewicz, who's been bad against lefties. He's $3,600. You can target him. If you want a cheap guy, second base or short, as a piece of that New York Yankees stack in GPP, Steven Drew got some power as a middle infielder for $3K. I don't mind him. Overall, second base just not a great spot. Cesar Hernandez at $2,900 against R.A. Dickey. I don't mind. I haven't really found a sample size. I'm not sure he's even faced a guy who throws that's a knuckleballer yet in his career. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting tough to see that.
I mean, Devin Trios at 4,100 hitting first in the lineup against Williams. Fine play for me. I'm not super excited about paying 4,100 for a guy that had been struggling a ton before he hit that leadoff home run last night, but kind of hard to argue with. My favorite play of the day was D. Gordon, but unfortunately he's not in the DraftKings player pool today. So that takes that out of consideration. Outside of that, I mean, I'm probably sticking to the top. I don't mind Colton Wong against D. Scalfini. I think he's a fine play, but 4,100. I'd like to play a cheap guy at second base today, but there aren't a ton of options. You mentioned Hernandez already, but there's concerns with the knuckleball pitcher. Outside of that, I mean, maybe Daniel Murphy against Ross. If you're not using Ross, he's 3,100. Solarte's been hitting second in the lineup for San Diego with second base eligibility, facing Cologne. I think he might end up being my favorite play if he's hitting second in the lineup again at 2,700.
Yeah, I could definitely see that because I'm with you. I want to save at second base. There's nobody that really jumps off the page as anything close to a must play at all there. So I think that I want to save myself some money as well.
Yeah.
All right, moving on here to third base options. I love Josh Donaldson again at home against a bad righty, 5,200. He's going to have much lower ownership than he did last night, of course, since it's not a lefty, but this is still a great spot, like I mentioned, for them. So you got to like him quite a bit. Below him, Manny Machado in a righty-righty matchup. Foltynewicz is better against righties, but Manny Machado's been better against righties than he has against lefties as well. So you got to like him in this spot. And those are probably my top two options if I'm going to be paying up.
Yeah, Matt Carpenter is the guy I'm going to use in cash games a lot, I think, today. 3,900 is just super cheap for him in the middle of that St. Louis order. I like him quite a bit. Anthony Rendon, who was a guy I didn't mention at second base, is a guy I'll probably look at a little bit. I think he's on his fourth game back now, his second start, but he's reached base in every game since he's returned from the DL again. I know he's a talented guy. He's just been struggling with injuries all year. 3,400 is pretty cheap for a guy hitting that high in the order, though, and with as much upside as he has. We'll do my usual segue from third base to shortstop. Tyler Saladino is still only 2,400, hitting second against Porcello. He's a guy I'll look at. Outside of that, no one else I'm too excited about cheap-wise, like really far down there. Saladino is probably going to be in a good 25-30% of lineups again, like he has been the last 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. You mentioned it a million times how cheap he is and how he's just in a good spot until he's more expensive. I mean, there's not much risk there, and he's actually been hitting the ball pretty well, so take advantage there. With Mike Trout sitting out, Connor Gillespie's hit second, so you can consider him at $2,600 as well if you're not playing the other side of that one.
Definitely.
Shortstop options, I still love Carlos Correa. I do like Garrett Richards. He's a good pitcher, but if there's any one Houston bat I'll be playing in tournaments, it's going to be Correa. The guy is just crushing everyone. Troy Tulowitzki's only $4,100 in his new home. He went, I believe it was 0 for 5 with a walk last night, or maybe it was 1 for 5. But struggled in his first start, but $4,100 for him in this matchup. Gotta like that. Now he's got something to play for finally with a decent team in the Blue Jays. Hanley Ramirez, if you're not playing Quintana, does kill lefties. 3,900. I don't love it because I do like Quintana quite a bit tonight. But probably the guy that I'll be playing more often than not as a cheap option at shortstop is going to be Didi Gregorius. He's been hitting the ball really well. Multi-hits in 4 of his last 5 starts. 29 and 26 in his last 2 games. You don't like his lineup spot. Probably going to be batting 7th tonight, but I mean, for cheap exposure to a game that should be pretty high scoring, I don't mind that at all tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll probably be using Saladino a ton at 2,400, like I mentioned at third base. I think I'll have him quite a bit. Hanley Ramirez against a lefty with shortstop eligibility, pretty hard to argue with. Tulowitzki, if he's in the lineup today, should be pretty interesting for Toronto. I'm not sure what that lineup's going to look like. Maybe Donaldson leading off and Tulo hitting second. Could be Travis hitting leadoff and Tulo hitting second. I mean, it's really going to be interesting to see who they bump down in the order there.
Yeah.
I would kind of guess it would be Travis, but then he had a home run last night, so who knows if they give him a second go around at the top of the order after he was pretty successful there early in the season too. And you mentioned Cesar Hernandez already. He's another cheap shortstop option. Outside of that, I think you covered the rest of the guys I was looking at.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot else to see at shortstop today. Outfield, another interesting night there. You don't love paying up for most of these guys. Most of them aren't necessary. Jose Bautista left last night's game with what he said was a cramp. Maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't. Certainly like him if he's in the lineup. Bryce Harper hasn't really had a whole lot of upside recently. Tom Kohler's actually been pretty good, so I'll use him sparingly, but not a guy I'm going to be playing a lot. Gardner and Ellsbury, if I'm paying up, are going to be the two guys I'm really targeting. Take your pick with them. I mean, you got Gardner listed at $500 more. I think if Ellsbury fits and Gardner doesn't, obviously he's a perfectly fine option instead. I wouldn't mind playing both of them, to be honest with you, because I think that is going to be a really high-scoring game once again.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned the A's are pretty cheap. Josh Reddick's $2,900 against Bolsinger. Billy Burns only $3,400. He's been super high priced for a long time, so it's nice to see him pretty cheap again. Jason Hayward's another lefty Cardinal that I like against DeScalfani. Christian Yelich, I don't mind for $3,500 against Pfister, hitting third in that lineup. With D. Gordon back at the top is always nice to help his RBIs. As far as a cheap guy, Rusty Castillo. I'm hoping he's probably going to be 6 or 7 in the lineup, but I think he had 8 last night. $2,400 is a pretty cheap price for him, though.
Yeah, that's a really good call, actually. I think he's a pretty nice prospect. Hasn't really hit much when he's been up, but he's certainly going to have his chance now with Victorino gone. I like other options from Toronto. Chris Colabello should be in the lineup. If for some reason, not for some reason, because of his injury, we see Jose Bautista sit out, Ezekiel Carrera could be in the lineup. He's only $2,400 if you want a cheap piece of Jerome Williams there. You're not chasing the home runs. He did hit 2 home runs in two of his last 3 games, but he's not much of a power hitter. But $2,400 for a guy in that lineup, I don't mind him as a filler though.
Yeah, another Boston guy, Daniel Nava, could be hitting second in the lineup tonight against the lefty. He's crushed lefties in his career. I've mentioned him a couple times when he's been hitting 8 or 9 for Boston. He's just has really strong numbers in both the minor leagues and the major leagues against lefties. Yeah. Flat 2,000 on DraftKings with first base and outfield eligibility. I think he makes for a nice value play. Will Venable still hitting first for San Diego against righties. He faces Cologne tonight for $2,700, another cheap outfield option. You can do a lot of stuff in the outfield tonight as far as cheap guys go. You mentioned you don't like a lot of guys at the top. I don't really either. I'm probably going to be saving at second base and outfield today and loading up at first, short, and third. So there's a ton of options out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.